Constantine, a Hellblazer podcast.
Hey there, everybody, and welcome back to John Constantine, a Hellblazer podcast. Today we are reading issue number 125. And just a little catch up on what's been going on in the last couple issues. The last story arc covered John going to America to visit Danny's family. And while he was doing that, he noticed something interesting. Danny's family, I guess, was arguing, which is out of character for them. And they were all fighting the whole time. And then also, the First of the Fallen reappeared in John's life kind of randomly. And at first, John thinks he's the reason why the family's kind of acting weird. And also, John noticed other people in America acting weird as well. So he thought maybe the First was doing this, but it turned out there's someone else in the background doing something, and the First was just there to watch it. Although he did help John just a little bit, he asked him a riddle that was supposed to help John, and it ended up helping him. I'm not sure exactly how, because the point of it was, what is the word quiz? Like, where does the word quiz come from? Turned out it was from two Irish guys in a bar making a bet that they couldn't create a new word. And the guy that was trying to make the new word paid a bunch of kids in town to graffiti the word quiz, which wasn't a word at the time, all over the walls of the city. And then people started talking about it, and it ended up becoming a word in our language. And I wasn't 100% sure on what that exactly meant in regards to what's going on in America. I do know that there's a second storyline going on where there's a man named Gavin, and he is talking to a ghost version of his dead girlfriend, Pam, and she has been, it seems, implanting memories about how John ruined their life and was the reason for Pam getting killed. So while that's going on in the background, John actually figures out how to save Danny's family from all the anger and stuff that's affecting them, and what he does is he uses the grandpa's memories and implants them in the different children that are arguing and having issues. And he does this while they're dreaming, and I guess because of that, it makes them wake up and realize that they all love their grandpa and their family and stuff. So once that happened, they were all good and the family was getting along fine. So now that holiday is over, and we're going back to England in this issue. Oh, and just for any of you guys that are really Hellblazer files and whatnot, and you want to read everything that has to do with this, there is one issue that is in continuity, but it doesn't have anything to do with the story. That takes place in the middle of the last arc, and it's called Vertigo Winter's Edge #1. And that's kind of like the Vertigo Jam issue that happened during the Garth Ennis run. It's a side thing that's going on, but it is in continuity. And basically, it's just about John going to a bar because he's trying to get away from talking to Uncle Fred too much. And it's probably like after the first issue, like the first night they're there, maybe he does this. But I wasn't exactly sure when it took place. It wasn't as clear cut as the Garth Ennis one in Vertigo Jam was. So I just kind of left it out because it also didn't have anything to do with the main storyline. But it is a cool issue. I enjoyed it. So if you want to pick that up because you must have everything Hellblazer, that definitely fits in right in the middle of the previous storyline. So with that, I think we're all caught up. And in case you didn't know, issue 125 is the first issue of the final arc in Paul Jenkins' run. So we're almost done with Paul Jenkins, and I believe there's a 6-issue little Garth Ennis story in the middle of this arc and the next arc. And I don't know about all you guys, but I'm very excited to see what happens at the end of this. It has definitely been a fun run. So first things first, with issue 125, we got the cover. We see a scarecrow version of John, and it is on fire, and it is in the middle of an empty, snowy field. And we see this issue was written by Paul Jenkins with art by Warren Pleece. And as we turn to the first page, we see the name of this issue is How to Play with Fire Part 1, Blowing on the Embers, which is very apropos because John is sitting in the middle of a forest and he has started a fire and he is poking at it with a stick. And as he does that, he says, "You're probably wondering what I'm doing here. I suppose this is one for the grandkids though, eh? I mean, you're probably thinking, well, I never, John Constantine. After all this bloody time, it's a funny world, isn't it? Not really." And as he stares at the fire, he brings his left palm up and we see inside of it he is holding a butterfly pendant or necklace of some kind. And John says, "I'll let you in on a secret. You're not the only one who's surprised. I always assumed you'd be the last fucking person I'd turn to. But I had to. See, it's about me. My life, I mean. It's all gone tits up, and it's all my fucking fault. And as he says this last line, he seems to be in real anguish, so it kind of looks like maybe he's going to cry or something. And as he closes his eyes, it seems like he's remembering back to when him and his friends were all together, and it's a sunny day, and it looks like they're in a park because John is surrounded by trees and bushes and stuff, and you think he's just enjoying nature, but then as the panel zooms out, he is just taking a piss on a tree. So there's that. And as he's doing this, we hear someone run up and say, John, oi, con job. And John is kind of taken out of the peaceful moment he was having while taking a piss, and he turns to see Rich running towards him, and Rich says, Christ almighty, man, it's almost time. You coming? And then John smiles and jokingly says, not quite, mate. It's just the way I'm standing. Then we see what Rich was talking about, and it seems to be the christening of Ivy Mae, the new baby that Rich and Michelle just had. So as John and Danny and all the other friends watch, John's narration says, it begins, as it always does, with a disconcerting sense of calm. Turbulent waters beneath a tranquil surface. A day trip to Kent to participate in Ivy Mae's christening. Since I've been press-ganged into Godfather duty, I have no choice but to play along. I content myself with looking as surly as possible. It's a wonder, then, that I actually lose myself in the moment. With my boredom temporarily shelved, I become mesmerized by the drone of the debaucherous old priest named Ken, and the unmistakable odor of 20 hippie punk refugees. And we see the priest that John is talking about, and he has a suit on, but he has long hair and sunglasses and a beard, so not sure if he's actually 100% legit, but he is what they're using as a priest. And then we kind of zoom out and we see the other people that are there, like he said, they're old hippie punks. And as the priest baptizes the baby, he says, so with love, we spread the name of Ivy Mae Palace Elridge to the four winds, like bird song. And the moment the water touches the baby's head, she begins to cry. And with that, the ceremony is over. And then in the next panel, we see John awkwardly trying to hold Ivy Mae, like someone put her in his arms. And he is smoking right next to the baby, so that's always good. And we also see Danny is smiling big behind him, like maybe she likes the idea of John holding a baby. And as he holds her, John thinks, it's the sublimely absurd ceremony itself, I think, that sets the tone for what's to come. There's a warning in there somewhere. In this age-old English pageant, disguised as one of Rich's dopey ideas. I hear it for quite a while before it registers. See, maybe on the face of it, it's just a yomp out into the woods with a bucket of water, some scruffy oiks, and a wet baby. But underneath, it's definitely something more. And as he says this, we see some more people appear out of the woods, and leading them is Jack of the Green, and I believe the rest of the people are from Albion, the kind of fairy tale land of England that could be or was. And I also think one of these people walking is King Arthur. But it looks like maybe they just wave and say hi, and they don't really stick around, because in the next panel, they're pretty much gone, and we're just focusing on the people again. So then John hands baby Ivy Mae back to Michelle, and he looks kind of relieved to be doing this, and everybody can see the look on his face, and so Rich looks at him and says, ha! Fuck me! It's the Sodfather! Just playing around with John, and then Danny smiles and brings John a beer and says, the look on your face, John, you gotta admit, that was fucking funny. Then John looks over to the priest, who is sitting cross-legged in front of a tree, and John says, is it my imagination, or did the frickin' 60s end a while back? And he kind of motions to the priest as he says this, and Danny looks at him and says, aw, I thought he was sweet. And then John sarcastically says, narcotically challenged, more like. And Danny says, give it up, John. You're just too proud to admit it. You're finally living the good life. And she's kind of smiling as she says this, like she's thinking everything's going to turn out so well. And as she says this, John's narration says, which, as all Constantine observers know, is the universe's cue to come crashing down in flames. Then we see all the other people kind of leaving the event, and as we turn the page, we see their friend Muppet, who was there, and he's riding his motorcycle home, and as he does, someone in a car comes up behind him and is trying to pass him, and as they do, he looks at them, and of course he's drinking a beer as well, and he yells, all right, you impatient git, keep your hair on. And right as he says that, the car purposefully begins to merge into his lane and hits him and leaves him on the ground bleeding, and then drives away. And we see the driver of that car is actually Gavin, and in the passenger seat is Pam, and Pam says to him, "Nice driving as always, my love." Which sounds like an insult, kind of, because he is the reason why she is dead because of his driving. And also his eyes are just like super wide open, and he looks like he's possessed or something. Then we turn the page and we cut to Danny's flat. And we see John is there, and it's nighttime and they're sleeping. And over these panels, John's narration says, "The warning sounds again, much later. It's come to London on a cool summer wind, further obscured by the rumble of the suburbs. I feel it, tugging instantly, but I try to ignore it in the vague hope that it'll get bored and go away." And as John sleeps, he begins to dream, and we see him walking in the snow, and he's walking through a completely empty field, and the narration says, "I make good my escape into the dream, and find instead only a lifeless landscape." And as John walks through the empty field, he comes upon a scarecrow that has a trench coat just like him, and he kind of stares at it, and his narration continues saying, "Another layer is peeled away then. Another aspect of my situation is revealed. On the exterior, the dream reveals that same old sense of calm, but I see it for what it is, a portent of things to come. I'm all alone. Everything's dead." And we see John wake up, and as he looks at Danny and out the window, his narration continues saying, "And even though I wake next morning into a bright future, I've got very cold feet." Then we get to later that day, I believe, and John is walking back into the flat from having got a newspaper and some silk cuts, cigarettes. And as he's walking into the flat, he's kind of singing under his breath, "Listen, John, I love you, but there's this boy I fancy, so it's the end for you and me." Which is actually a song by a band called Jilted John, and the name of the song is Jilted John. And as he walks in through the main door of the flat, we see him going up the stairs, and as he does, we see Straff appear, and Straff says, "Oi, John." And John turns and says, "Watcher, Straff, what can I do for you, mate?" And it seems like Straff is being kind of weird because he doesn't actually open the door all the way, so you can barely see his face through the crack. And it seems like maybe he's upset with John, and he says, "It's Muppet. There's been an incident. They've got him up at St. George's." And then he shuts the door, but he continues speaking through it, and he says, "You'd better go and see him, eh?" And John just kind of stares like he doesn't know why Straff is being weird, and he says, "Nice chatting with you too, then." Then we turn the page, and we cut to Gavin and Ghost Pam. And Gavin looks like he's doing some sort of magic because he's kneeling in front of a fireplace that has a bunch of candles, and there's some sort of sigil painted over it, and he's holding a cup in his hands, and he's speaking the words of a spell, saying, "Palas, Aron, Azimonis, Bagai, Laka, Bachabe, maker of hatred and prolonger of enmity." And then the glass shatters in his hands, and of course the shards cut into his flesh, and as his hands bleed, he yells out, "In the name of Adonai Zaboeth, Adonai Amorium, born by the pestilous hatred of Sidiel and Prudziel, from the blackness of Indet, I summon thee." And then the candles blow out, and coming from the fireplace, we begin to see some yellow energy lines that are pouring out towards Gavin, and we also see that Pam has a big smile on her face as this is happening. And then we see a hand shoot out from this energy and grab onto Gavin's, and then Gavin pulls an old man out of the flames, and he looks down at the old man and says, "Lord Boor, I presume?" And Boor looks up at him and says, Who calls me here?" And then Pam steps forward and says, "Get up, leech. You are among friends here." So Boor stands up and he looks at Pam and he says, "You carry a familiar scent. It is of female spendings and a whore's attar. That you are not who you seem to be is clear. Less certain is what am I to make of this crude summoning. This mortal in your thrall is unprotected against me." And Pam replies, "You are too greatly concerned with trivialities for one in such a tenuous position, Boor. Perhaps it would be simpler to find another." And to this, Boor cries out, "Wait! I mean no disrespect." And then Pam gives an evil smile and says, "Of course you don't. Simply put then, We offer you an end to your current anguish inflicted by the first of the fallen, and with it, a bonus. We can give you the hidden soul of your former playmate Crowley. And then Gavin, with a very manic, crazy look in his eyes, says, added to which, we offer you the incomparable satisfaction of bringing John Constantine to his knees. And Boor's kind of thinking it over, and he says, and how can I be certain that these things are yours to offer? And Pam answers, what then, Boor? A return to your torment, that which should rightly have been visited upon Constantine? And then Boor gets very angry thinking about John, and he says, 1,000 days and nights magnified have I suffered at the whim of that capricious amateur, and to be given that idiot Crowley too, it is an offer I dare not refuse. And then he gets serious and he says, but you grant a boon that I cannot repay. In my current state, I have relinquished any hold on power or possession. The devil has my soul in chains. By rule of acquisition, I must offer you something in return. And then Gavin points out of the room into another room and he says, all right then, a cheese sandwich ought to do it. The kitchen's through there. So the only thing Boor has to do to get all the stuff he wants that just happens to be what Gavin wants is make Gavin a cheese sandwich. That's a pretty good deal. And as we turn the page, we cut to the hospital where we see what looks like in critical condition. He's all bandaged up in a bed, and he has a breathing tube, and sitting next to his bed is Lefty and Abaton. Then we cut out into the hallway where we see Danny and John arriving, and they're talking to a doctor who says, I won't lie to you, the situation's rather grave, I'm afraid. And Danny asks, how grave? And the doctor answers, look, we're confident we've stemmed any internal bleeding, but that doesn't mean he's out of the woods yet. The impacts bruised his brain, and it's dangerously swollen. And as the doctor's speaking, John just walks away and pulls out a cigarette and lights it as he goes over to Muppet's room. And we do see above the door of Muppet's room, it says critical. So as John comes in, Lofty and Slob turn to look at him. And I guess John, trying to use sarcasm to lighten the mood, says, some people choose a funny way to expand their fucking minds. And then he flicks his cigarette ash in a fruit bowl that is on a small table next to his bed, and this pisses off Lofty because Lofty stands up and says, you what? You fucking what? You think it's fucking funny, Constantine? I'll show you what's fucking funny. And John tries to calm him down, saying, steady on, Lofty. But Lofty continues yelling, you've always got to shine, haven't you? That's me best fucking mate lying there, and you're too busy taking center fucking stage to know when to shut your gob. Then Lofty and Slob get up, and as they walk out, Lofty yells back, don't say you're sorry or anything. You've done enough. Just fuck off and leave the rest of us alone, all right? And Slobodan basically has to pull Lofty out, saying, come, Loftus. It's best we go now, yes? Then we just see John standing there alone by Muppet, and his narration says, you know what really stings? When you try to do a good deed, and you get criticized for it. And you know what's worse? When they're right. Then we turn the page and we cut to Lofty at a bar getting drunk, and he's watching all the different pairs of friends that look like they're having a great time, and he's obviously sad because he's missing Muppet. And as he stares, the narration says, he listens without emotion to some folk at the bar, laughing it up while his best mate lies at death's door. His gut aches too much to care anymore. Been feeling rotten like this for a long while. Thinking back, maybe it started that night him and Muppet helped out with that dog thing. And right here, we're getting a flashback to something that happened in a previous issue. I believe it was when we first met Muppet and Lofty. And I don't quite remember the issue, but there was definitely a ghost dog of some sort because they had to get meat and urine, and then they had to make a trail of it. And the two guys that helped John out was Lofty and Muppet. So as he thinks back, the narration continues. Maybe it was all that piss they spread over the floor that poisoned them like. More like it was that horrible stew Constantine fed them that night in his bird's flat. He joked that it was somebody's head like. But it weren't. It were bloody bad meat that made them all ill. Maybe Mupp got dizzy from it. That's why he crashed. And under that narration, we do see the moment from when John fed them a stew made from the head of a Knight of the Round Table during the King Arthur story arc. And as Muppet's thinking about all this, We see Boor approach him from the side and say, "Yes, that's what must have happened." Then we turn the page and we cut to Slobodan, who is staring in his backyard, and he's looking out of the cemetery, and the narration says, Slobodan looks into the dark night and can see only ghosts. Ghosts of the past, like old stories told to him as a child. Ghosts of the mind, waked from sleep. This is because he tires to live where he does not belong. They come to drive him away. They enter him. They make him see things he should not. And of course, this is referencing what just happened maybe like 6 issues ago, where Slobodan moved here, and then because the cemetery was in his backyard, a bunch of ghosts started rising and bothering him. And as he stares at the graveyard through the bars of his backyard gate, we see Pam is standing there, but I'm not sure if he sees her, or if he does, maybe he just thinks she's a ghost. But the narration says, he remembers now who is the reason for this. And then we hear Pam say, John Constantine. Then we turn the page and we cut to John in his flat, and he's just kind of staring out the window and smoking. And as he goes to close the window, he looks down and he sees by a tree there is a man in a hoodie, and he recognizes that man as Jack of the Green, and he says, bloody hell. So he comes down, and as he gets outside, he says, you freezing your Brussels sprouts off or what? But Jack of the Green doesn't seem amused by this, and he says, Constantine, I did not come to course to thy flippance. A matter of great importance has risen. Then John lights a cigarette and says, course it has, mate. There's always something of bloody import with you lot. Fairy King lose his wallet, did he? And Jack of the Green is not amused by any of that, and he says, quiet, jester! This is not thy stage. I must needs impart that Abaton, the nether, of all of fairy is ruined. It decays even as these moments pass. The other world is surely dying, John Constantine, and the fault lies with thee. And John gets mad at that accusation, so he says, much as I'd actually be amused if that were true, Jack. You can fuck off. You're fishing, but I'm not biting. And Jack says, much as it is true, knave. 'Twas by thy comforting that the king did come for the box, Constantine. Though it be poisoned and intoxicated us, I gave it to him, and thusly into your keeping. Yet didst thou choose to open it, and to feed the poison to the others, a vile pollution of natural order, without so much as a thought given to the consequences. The same pollution which now spills out from thy unbarbed injured friend and into the nether. So in case you missed that because of what Jack is saying, he is also kind of doing what Lofty was doing and is blaming John, whatever's going on with Abaton, and he's saying whatever's happening is due to John feeding his friends the stew that was made of that guy's head, which seems to be an idea that was put into Lofty's head by Boor. Of course, John doesn't know any of that, so he's confused and he says, hold on a minute. But Jack does not hold on. He points at John and he says, the time has gone for fuckship, John Constantine. This dire situation is neither for your approval nor remedy. Then we get a flash of why he's so upset. It's because he went to Abaton and he found a bunch of people dead, and he recounts it to John saying, 'Twas sudden and urgent. I returned from Dickon's ceremony to find Abaton in decay. The gates were open, the courtyard reechy and foul, the wood in flames. I did approach one lying there to see her almost gone, and all others with her, diseased and repugnant. They withered as leaves and died. It began to snow in Abaton, as it has never done for 1,000 years. Then was my grave decision made with urgency. You have befouled the nether, Cullion, with no contingency for your mistake, so I must remove Abaton from mortal interference. That you could do such a thing without question, John Constantine, is evidence of your foolish, dangerous nature. And John isn't having this accusation at him, so he says, not true, Jack. One question does spring to mind, actually. Since when did the ethereal fucking lettuce crew sit in judgment on the rest of us? And Jack of the Green fires back, since tonight, jester, since we were poisoned by thy hand. I have informed your king. He knows it all now, and is in agreement. Abaton is to be severed from human attachment. And then he reaches behind himself and grabs onto the tree on the street, and then it seems like his body begins to grow into it. And as he becomes one with the tree, his last words are, This will be your curse, John Constantine, that one night you will see Abaton in your dreams across a field. The light in the courtyard will invite your weary soul, and you will chase it with all your remaining will to the other side. But when you get there, it will be gone. And with that, Jack of the Green disappears into the tree, and John says after him, "You mean I can't be in your fucking gang anymore, Jack? Oh dear, whatever shall I do?" And as he says this, we do see a car parked on the street across from him, and then we cut inside that car, and we see Pam and Gavin are watching him, and as he lights a cigarette, Gavin says, "It's working, Pam. It's bloody working. One by one, every single one of his friends and allies are abandoning him." And then Pam smiles and says, "I see no further need for secrets between us, Gavin. If you prefer, you may call me Chantinelli." And right there is the big reveal. It seems that Chantinelli, having been tricked by John earlier in this run, is getting revenge on him finally, and she has been pretending to be Pam this whole time. But we will have to wait until next time to see what happens with John and Chantinelli's plan. So if you guys have any comments, questions, or suggestions, you can email me at planestrains and comic books, all one word, @gmail.com, and we will see you on the next one.